Hi, welcome to Planet Hex. I'm Andrew Hawnt. On this 50th episode of Planet Hex, I'm going to do something a little bit different. This is my private multiverse. Alongside music and movies, one of my greatest passions is vintage science fiction paperbacks. Sci-fi from the 1940s to the 1980s has long since been a source of inspiration, a place to hide, and a voice of reason during turbulent times. Here I'd like to show you some of the vintage science fiction library that it has taken me 20 years to collect. As a writer, these books have changed my life. Maybe they'll change someone else's too. I'm Andrew Hawnt. Welcome to my private multiverse. So in a way, science fiction came to my rescue. When my collection began 20 years ago, 2000, 2001 sort of time, I was in a really bad place. There was a lot of stress going on in my life. I was broke. I was working a job that didn't pay my bills, so I was getting behind with rent and things like that. Didn't feel good. I really couldn't go out many places or do many things. What I could do was read. I went to charity shops and picked up some science fiction books as a, some cheap entertainment. Good for commuting, good for at home, good for when I needed to save some electricity, so my electricity meter didn't run out. That's how bad it was. And I remember picking up some Asimov, some Silverberg, things like that, lots of TV and film tie-in books, and really being transported by them. And I developed a taste for classic vintage sci-fi. And for me, vintage is the sort of era between the 1940s to sort of the start of the 1980s. That's the sort of era that I prefer myself, and the sort of thing that I collect mainly. So yeah, it was an interesting time, very turbulent time life-wise. But these things do pass and they do get better, but it is good to have something to help you along the way. And for me, that was science fiction. I wound up reading a short story a day, developed a great love for the short story format through these classic authors, like Isaac Asimov, Clifford Simak, Robert Heinlein, Theodore Sturgeon, Robert Silverberg, all these wonderful, wonderful writers from throughout the years. They really gave me something special, and I'm very, very grateful for that. Science fiction came into my life as a child. I loved Star Trek and Star Wars, and always loved stories of space battles and space operas and heroic daring do and little glimpses of what it could be like to live in the future. But it was when I began my vintage sci-fi collection that things really started to help me out in a very personal sense. So yeah, science fiction came along and it saved the day. once science fiction came along and saved me, I decided I should go out there and save science fiction. By that, I don't mean by writing the greatest science fiction novel of all time. I'm sure that's already been done. What I mean is by making sure that the pulps and the old digest magazines and the old paperback science fiction titles that were out there in charity shops and second-hand shops and on eBay and all kinds of places didn't go to the wrong person. And by the wrong person, I meant someone other than me. So for a long time, I saw it as my duty, because these books gave me so much pleasure and such a great sense of solace and reassurance, that I should go and get as many of them as possible. I should gather them all up. It's the same thing that happened with VHS tapes when I was hugely into my VHS collecting. But these sci-fi books, they've really given me something powerful that has lasted, and not just as a reader, but they've also given me a lot of inspiration as a writer as well. But once it kicked in that these were my thing and I could find so much enjoyment and pleasure and inspiration from them, I had to get out there and I had to rescue them in return. As a lot of the authors that I discovered had such a huge wealth of short fiction available through magazine work and their own anthologies and things like that, I wanted to seek out more and more short story collections. So the main crux of my collection is more short story collections and anthologies rather than just straight ahead novels. I do have quite a lot of the novels as well, and I've enjoyed them, but for me the art of the short story is just phenomenal. Being able to dive into a new world or discover something new in a short condensed period of time with a condensed space available to you is just a wonderful thing to behold. So I would often try and read a short story on each half of my commute, you know, one there, one on the way back. If I didn't get to do that, I would make sure I read one in the evening. I had to do at least one short story a day, just because I needed that fix. I needed the escapism. Because things were difficult, I needed to get out of there, even just mentally for a while, and feel inspired, and that is certainly what these things did. So my private multiverse began out of necessity and became so much more, and I'm so grateful to all these authors, these late authors, the authors that are still around, and the people that are going forward carrying on creating this stuff. Thank you so much. This has really made an enormous difference to me. my top 10. It's not top 10, it's just 10 of the greatest in my collection. One good favourite is Opus, the best of Isaac Asimov. Now, Asimov is a huge hero of mine. His writing is very inspiring to me. The amount of stuff that he got done is hugely inspiring. I know not everyone is a fan of Asimov, the writer or the person, but I am personally is one of the most important creators that I've ever, had the pleasure of welcoming into my own personal pantheon. I would put him up there with Gene Roddenberry and Stan Lee and George Lucas. In the pantheon of people that are a huge influence on your life, Asimov is right up there for me. One of my other favourites is this Ace double novel. So the Ace books came with one on either side. So on one side of this one we've got A. Van Voogt's The World of Null A, but on the other side we've got another one by A. Van Vogt, Universe Maker, and I'm an absolute sucker for this artwork. Check out this artwork, it is glorious. The next on this stack will be The Best of Frederick Pohl, an incredible writer. I do prefer his short fiction to his novels. His novels are great, but I do prefer the short fiction. Robert Heinlein's Stranger in a Strange Land. This made a difference to my reading and my development. It's a great book, One of the collections that I have a great deal of love for is this one, edited by Isaac Asimov, the Hugo Winners 1963 to 1967. And that's very specific, not a very memorable title. You can see this book has had a lot of love. Mainly from me, but there have been previous owners of this. Now it just collects together some wonderful stories, and it's one of my favourite anthologies. It's just one of those that really seem to gel properly. So we've got stories by Jack Vance, Paul Anderson, Gordon R. Dixon, Harlan Ellison, Jack Vance and Larry Niven. It's a great book. Speaking of short stories, by far my favourite anthology is this one. This is a bit of a curiosity, and it's 100 great science fiction short stories. Now these are serious works of demented genius. A lot of the stories in here are just crazy, and some of them are like a page long, some of them are 2 pages long, some of them are, God forbid, they could be 3, 4, 5 pages long. Let's have a look at an example here. See if I can find one. But the thing is, while they are very short, there's one here. The Recreation by Robert E. Toomey Jr. It's like a page and a half. While they are very short, they are fascinating and they are compelling. And being able to condense so much into such a short space, as I've mentioned, is really inspiring to me, and it's one of the things that really inspired a lot of my flash fiction, was the way these stories were written. Foundation. This is pretty much my favourite novel of all time. I love the idea of Harry Seldon, I love the idea of psychohistory and everything that he stood for and what he was trying to do by creating the Foundation. It's a wonderful book, trying to avoid the big inevitable war, and making sure that there would be something left on the outside, on the other side of it. And I just love it. Awesome book. Now, one author that not everyone is familiar with when it comes to science fiction is Clifford D. Simak. And that's a shame, because his books are phenomenal. This is the most famous of his books. I believe it's the most famous of his books, next to City. City may have been on the same sort of scale, but Waste Station is incredible. About a dude on Earth who has a house and just takes care of this house, and that house is a waste station along an interdimensional sort of passageway, and he gets to hang out with lots of aliens in this waste station and help to put the universe to rights. Now, Tower of Glass by Robert Silverberg. I bought this for 10 pence from a charity shop about 2002, this very book. And I remember the lady very kindly and very nicely saying to me, "Oh, It's got 79 pence on it, that. Oh, I'm not going to charge you 79 pence for that. How about 10p? I think I must have been looking particularly down and out and down at heel at the time. So yeah, that's fine. Paid my 10p and went off and read it, and it absolutely changed my life. Whether you like it or not, sci-fi is damn well literature. Put up with it. At the end of this pile is a book that's very special to me. I do love the story, but I do have another reason for loving this book. Now, this particular copy, I do have other copies of this, it's Foundation and Empire by Isaac Asimov. This is the second book in the Foundation series. Don't think that Second Foundation is the second book. It's not. That's the one after. This is the second book in what was originally the Foundation trilogy, and it's a wonderful story. It brings together more of the Foundation material that Asimov had in the magazines, and is embellished to, put together into a novel form. But this book, this copy of this book, is the reason for my marriage. The first time my wife saw me, I was reading this. I was at a shop counter that I was working at, and I was reading. Should have been working, but this is the book that she spotted me reading, and as she's a huge reader, she was trying to, what's he reading? Yeah, that's really important book to me. But all the books in the collection are really important to me, and that's just 10 of my greatest treasures in my collection. So what can a modern audience get out of classic science fiction? There's a lot of times in classic SF where the science is wrong, or it's a bit dubious, or some of the attitudes, the societal attitudes are dubious, or just the way people act or speak don't really work with a modern audience. And I totally get that. But on the other hand, I believe there is a lot for modern audiences to get out of vintage science fiction still. There are some great morality tales in there. There's some great social commentary. There's some excellent ideas on how we can move forward as a species, physically as well as societally. And it's just, there's a great sense of moving forward. There's a great sense of optimism that we will get through whatever awful thing we're currently going through. I mean, you could be arguing that these are turbulent times and it's hard to see in the other side of it, but all times are turbulent. Some more than others, admittedly, but all times have their issues, and I believe that science fiction and fantasy, and indeed fiction in general, is a great way to see a mirror of what was going on at the time when they were written and the mindset that people were in. And I think vintage SF, has a great deal to offer in terms of optimism and ideas for us all just getting on. So my vintage science fiction journey is ongoing. there's always going to be a title I've not read. There's always going to be another magazine digest that I've not found before, with another nugget of short fiction that will just remind me just how wonderful the universe can be, and how wonderful the human mind can be that comes up with these. To the men and women that have come up with these stories throughout the years, thank you. You have changed my life, you've changed my career, and I'm so grateful, and I hope that people around the world still continue to discover these things. So my own private multiverse, it's on my bookcases.
Thank you for watching. Please like, share and subscribe.